Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. Welcome to episode 288, When We're Forced to Choose. This episode is a special episode, and it's not unrelated to some topics that I've covered over the years on the podcast before, but it's a unique and interesting way to approach it. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read kind of a heartbreaking, but very detailed and interesting email from a listener, all the way from Kenya, who has been listening to the show for quite a while and trying to implement as many music literacy and program building ideas into his choir classroom as possible. Well, it also ties into other things that I've talked about, not just literacy. I've talked about what happens when teachers feel some sort of moral injury. What happens when we know what we're doing for kids is good for them, but we face barriers, whether they are administrative barriers or cultural barriers related to the other colleagues in the area and what people expect of our music classrooms. Are they too performance focused? Are we forcing kids to be in a box repertoire wise that they're not actually ready for and slowing down their growth later on? And do these ideas actually lead us towards feelings of burnout? Now, this particular person did not ask me about the burnout question, but I was feeling it for him because at a certain point, those two things come head to head where I feel like I'm being forced to teach my kids in a way that is not what is best for them. But it's either that or I lose my job. And that forces us into that moral injury place where I think a lot of us then end up towards the end of our careers feeling like we are burnt out because the things that we are trying to do for kids are just not working for one reason or another. And it's not the pedagogy, it's not the people, it's not the kids, sometimes not even the parents. It's just the ecosystem in which we live. So stick around. What I will do is I will read this letter, and then I will comment, and I will offer this person advice. And I think you're going to find a little bit of you and a little bit of yourself, if you're an educator, in this letter. Choir directors, music educators, show planners, you pour your heart into your music. Shouldn't your events get the same attention? That's where Ludus comes in. Sell tickets, promote your concerts, and fundraise with ease. Selling merchandise and concessions? Ludus Retail makes in-person sales effortless. Running choir camps or workshops? They have a classes feature that keeps registration simple, and when you need help, the live support team is ready to pop up with real answers from real people. The best part? It's completely free for organizations. Thousands of music programs already trust Ludus because great music deserves more than just a ticketing system. Ensemble trips can be more than just a performance. They can build community, inspire artistry, and give students a reason to stay invested. That's why I recommend Kaleidoscope Adventures. For more than 30 years, Kaleidoscope has helped student groups travel with purpose, combining performance opportunities with experiences that deepen musical understanding and create lifelong memories. They'll help you find the right destination, the right venue, and the right balance of music, education, and fun. And they manage the planning from start to finish so you can focus on your job as an educator. To explore options for your choir, visit mykatrip.com or find the link in the show notes. A big shout out goes to the producers and Inner Circle over at the Patreon page. These are folks that are really dedicated to keeping the lights on here at this show. Venture Studios, Chandler Smith, Brian Long, Michael Herron, Kyle Peterson, Steve and Kathy Kakachik, David Kowalczyk, Max Jackson, Angie Schilling, Rebecca Chalk, RJ McCracken, Michael Shimp, and Kyle Siddons. I will be keeping this person's name anonymous to respect the wishes of the listener. Dear Chris, I hope you are doing well. I've been listening to Choralosophy since 2023. I'm a big fan of your work and the way you approach choral education, rehearsal technique, and the philosophy behind building strong choirs. Your discussions have challenged and inspired me a great deal, especially as I navigate choral work here in Kenya. I wanted to reach out because I work with two different choirs, and both represent a challenge that I believe you often address on the podcast: balancing long-term musicianship development with immediate performance demands. The first group is a secondary school choir. In Kenya, choir is largely treated as an extracurricular activity rather than a core academic subject. Yet, the expectations placed on us are extremely high because of the Kenya Music Festival. The festival is not just a competition for us, it is essentially the basis on which conductors are evaluated. Sound familiar? Some states in America, Texas, and in many cases, the primary reason they are employed in the first place. Conductors are hired specifically to train school choirs for the festival, so success at this festival is directly tied to professional reputation, job security, and continued employment. Because of this system, we are often forced to prepare extremely technical and complex repertoire in order to remain competitive and score well. I know you recommend starting with simple, manageable music to build foundational skills, which I fully agree with philosophically, but practically the system here pushes us in the opposite direction. So before I go any further, I'm going to unpack some of those things and tie you, the listener, to this letter and to this episode, to some of the things that this person is referencing that we have discussed on the podcast before. So, of course, one of the things that I teach in the literacy series and in this new current ongoing Give Them Tools and Let Them Build series is that if they don't know how to hold and strike with the hammer, then they're not ready to build a table. We have to start where they are and use musical concepts and musical skills that are, so to speak, in their musical vocabulary or library, things that they can access and sing back fluently. And of course, that's a process to work towards that. So if their literacy skills are not in line with the repertoire that you're giving them, then we can create all kinds of problems where they end up cutting corners, and then they will stop believing that the literacy skills are important because, hey, I can get there by cutting these corners. And I think that's the trap that a lot of choir students and, more importantly, choir teachers fall into. So that's what is being referenced here. Now, the other thing I wanted to unpack from that first part of this letter is just the system built in. Of course, I'm joking. Texas people, I'm teasing you. I love Texas. Have me come down to Texas and we'll do more presentations and different. I love coming down to Texas, but Texas is famous in the United States for having a similar type of an environment where it is the UIL drives everything. And that's for a lot of administrators. It's down there. From what I hear, I don't know. This is not firsthand. Tell me if I'm wrong, Texas people, but whether or not your administrator thinks you do a good job oftentimes can be attached to that. Now, we have that in Missouri a little bit, but I know directors who just don't go at all because they say it's not good for their kids and it's not what they want to do. So it's a mixed bag, and I'm sure Texas is not the only state that has this competition-driven culture. But what is being described here is a situation, it's a moral conundrum, where this person is in a situation where they feel like, I could teach the way I know is best for kids, and I could take a philosophy that I really believe in, and I could build confident, independent musicians from the ground up, but then I might get fired. I might lose my job. I might not have access to the kids in the first place. So that in my short answer that I wrote back to this person, I asked if I could give a longer, fuller answer here on the show, because I'm a talker, not a writer. And so my first thought was, obviously the answer is going to have to be a balance, because if you go full choralosophy mode and do everything exactly as I would want to do it, newsflash to the listeners, I don't do everything the exact way that I would like to do it, or that the research shows that I have to do it. I'm pretty darn close, because I'm fortunate to be the head of a program in a place that I've been long enough where people kind of trust that there's a program, that there's a process, and people are willing to stick with the process. But of course, I have to make my classroom fit the reality of the school I teach in and the principal's rules, all the other types of things that every public school teacher anywhere in the world has to deal with. And so this is the first, I think, the obvious thing for this person. The advice that I would give is you're going to have to find some happy medium where you can still do the complex repertoire that's going to get you the scores that you need, or whatever it is, so that you can maintain your ability to do what you can, building those core musicianship fundamentals. Now, this is not too different than the recent episode with Bruce Rockwell, where we talked about elementary school choirs. We talked about program building. We talked about starting kids where they are and choosing repertoire that is appropriate for them. But also in other recent episodes where we talked about the elementary school music system in the United States, which is a travesty for kids. And it's also a travesty for what it asks the teachers to be able to do. And I think it's created all kinds of problems in the way American teachers, also elementary school teachers, kind of have bought into a bunch of, like, we are not doing a good enough job mythology. It's not the teacher's fault when they see the kids for 45 minutes every other day or once a week or whatever. You can't teach mastery of musicianship in that amount of time. It takes time. So all of these things, of course, we've covered so much, but I think what we're hearing right now is that even though this person is all the way over in Kenya, since most of this audience is in the United States, although that percentage is falling, by the way, people from other countries are listening more and more. When this show started, probably for the first 5 years even, the audience was 95% in the United States. And it's fallen to somewhere like 80%. So we have, 1 in 5 listeners is somewhere else. And we're discovering that we are all facing a lot of the same types of challenges. So now I'm going to go back to the letter. I have even tried programming more level-appropriate and age-appropriate music to help stronger musicianship foundations, but I was told the music was too simple and that it needed to be more technical to be considered competition-worthy. There is a strong expectation that serious festival music must be difficult, regardless of whether that difficulty actually supports long-term growth. My struggle is this: how do I intentionally incorporate music literacy, sight reading, score understanding, and independent musicianship while still preparing students for highly demanding repertoire under intense competitive pressure? Another complication is that our secondary school choirs are usually not tiered by level. It is typically just one choir that includes everyone. A lot of American schools have that too, from first-year students all the way to final-year students. Because of that, there is no beginner choir and advanced choir separation where literacy can be developed progressively by level. This raises another challenge for me. If I begin intentionally teaching music literacy this year, and by the end of the academic year the students reach, for example, an advanced beginner or lower intermediate level, what happens the following year when the final year students graduate and a new group of first-year students join? So much to unpack here. Suddenly, the choir has singers with very different literacy levels, all within the same ensemble. Now, the person that I would direct folks to in this situation is Adam Paltrowitz. His whole high school program in New Jersey, New York, one of the news over there on the East Coast, is built this way too, where all the classes have both advanced kids and beginner kids, and does a lot of peer instruction, small group types of things with them. So I'd recommend checking out some of his things. But also the philosophy, even though in my classrooms, in our program, we have tiered instruction where there are beginners, there are intermediate level groups, and there are advanced groups, I don't know that I would change the philosophy just because they're all mixed together. In fact, my student-led sectional concept would, if this were my challenge, my advice would be to take the ideas that we discuss in some of our student-led sectionals episodes, but modify them to treat our advanced kids a little bit less like section leaders and more like secondary instructors. That when we go off into our small groups to work on the alto part, for example, we're not going to just have the advanced alto teach the whole song by rote just to get done with the sectional sooner. We're going to have the advanced alto teach some of these core fundamentals, have them lead exercises of beat keeping, of pitch matching, of the toxic pattern or forbidden pattern types of games, or conversational solfege. The upperclassman or the advanced singer then becomes a proxy instructor during those times, and they can be given a set of things to do. But of course, they will have a few years down the road, they will have learned them from their peers that were older and in there. And so that's this type of program and the type of concept with our student-led work that does take time to build as an expectation, as a culture, because the older kids are not just teaching the song, they're teaching how to learn the song. And of course, then when you're in large group instruction, you're reinforcing those things. And then also during that sectional time, they're going to be learning the song, but they're going to be learning it in a way that empowers them to be working independently once they've kind of established those tools. So I think ultimately my advice here specifically to the question of how do I facilitate the instruction when the levels within one group are so disparate, I think that would be my number one thing, because again, this is not just a problem with this one choir in Kenya. This is an issue that directors in many countries have brought to me. Well, I don't have, like you do, I don't have beginning, intermediate, and advanced. I've got a choir. So how do we do this? And the way I would answer it, in addition to those sectionals that I just said, is it's like you're building a class within a class. We actually, in our program, do have a little bit of this happening already, which is that we have our 10th grade boys in the advanced ensemble because there aren't enough of them for an intermediate boys group. And so we simply teach them differently while they're there. While they're in that ensemble, they've got to learn the same repertoire, but they get different amounts of fundamentals building opportunities, and then they're also graded differently. The grading scale that we use for them is different. And so there are ways to segment your class by ability level, to split out into groups, train student leaders. I think that is really the best way to go, to the point where once they all know the repertoire, then you're able to still do those advanced level things because of the guidance of those upperclassmen. So it's not the end of the world to have an ensemble that has multiple levels. It can be done. So I would encourage you to not let that be your barrier. It just might require you getting creative with how those older students and those experienced students help the next generation. Now back to the letter. Since this cycle will always repeat itself, how would you approach building a sustainable literacy system in that kind of structure? How do you keep advancing returning singers without constantly leaving new singers behind? There is also the issue of time. I know you do not usually advocate for relying heavily on tools like choral tracks, and I understand the reasoning behind it. However, in our context, I often have a maximum of 2 hours per week with the choir. On a very good week, maybe 3. At the same time, we are not preparing just 1 or 2 pieces for competition season. We may be working on anywhere between 10 to 15 pieces across different categories. Now, wow. So to me, if you can stop doing that and not lose your job, I would immediately cut that down. Are you allowed in this situation, to this listener, are you allowed to do less categories, for example? Because 3 hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week with that many pieces, I would not do that many pieces with my advanced musicians. And these are kids who can pretty darn near sight read anything. And I still wouldn't do that because I also want to have time to teach them about the poetry. And I want to have time to teach them about the history and the culture of the music that we are performing. I want to have time to teach them about how the voice works. I want to have time to teach them about how vowel formants and overtones work and how tuning functions and how a little bit at least about music theory so that they understand those things. Now, these are just my value system, because I would not want to run a classroom that is 100% performance focused. I'm good with 80% performance focused or whatever, but I don't think I would be happy with 100%. And so then my question would become, is there an administrator who you've talked to? Is there a person who is your boss, who you've had this conversation with, and tried to make this case and say, obviously you want to make him happy or her. So you would say maybe something like, I don't want to abandon the competitions. I want us to continue to do really well. And eventually I want us to even be better at these competitions. I think that there's a way for us to build towards that also fosters these kids educationally. And of course, then there's you said earlier in the letter that this is just not kind of how choir or music is seen where you are in Kenya culturally. And I understand that is a tough hurdle to jump over. But then I would also say that there are many places in the United States too where that's the case. And we are fortunate that we have institutionalized into a lot of our state laws that the fine arts requirement is there. So at least that gets us in the door with kids as a class. We get this music opportunity as an academic subject, but we still have to make that case to our bosses and to our administrators that no, we are not just an extra class for fun. This is something we are teaching that is beneficial to them for their lives, for their spirits, for their bodies, and for their brains. We are building brains with music education. Go check out the Bigger, Better Brains episode with Anita Collins are on this show. It's an incredible episode, and we talk about all these benefits that kids have, and that's a resource for us to go and talk to our administrators. The Bigger, Better Brains has collected a ton of information and evidence that we can present to people who don't believe us, that these skills that we are teaching are beneficial to kids, whether they want to be a musician or not. This is going to build the brains of the doctors. This is going to build the brains of the lawyers and build the brains of the people who are going to have to compete with AI, all of these types of things. So I think this is what I would encourage you to consider doing, is that because that last part, seeing that you work on anywhere between 10 to 15 pieces in that short amount of time at a time concerns me in terms of whether or not you will be able to build in some of these fundamentals so that they are learning through their own tool use. Now, I do want to address the choral tracks thing because yes, I have talked about how I don't think we should use tracks. Now, I've also been very clear, though, that to take that, I don't want people to take that as a moral absolute that is always true in all situations, and that choral tracks should stop existing as a company and they have no function. I've never said anything like that, and I don't want people to think that I'm against it in that way. So, for example, a choral tracks practice track for an honor choir that shows up on one day and sings some songs, absolutely. We're not going to meet together as a choir, so learn your part however you want to learn your part, absolutely fine. Situations like yours, too, to this listener, where you don't have enough instructional time to get to all the music that you are doing. I get it. Or so I have colleagues that see their choirs once a week. In order to do repertoire, they would have to be working outside of the rehearsal time. And because you have so little rehearsal time, you don't have time to teach them these fundamental skills and have them master them over many years, like we're trying to do in our high school program. So I get it. There's all these situations. So I definitely would not want anyone to think that I would shame someone for using choral tracks in a situation like this. Where I am a little bit more forceful with my stance on rehearsal tracks in general, and why I don't make them ever for our students where I am, or wouldn't allow them to use them, is because it does hinder their ability to connect with visual, kinesthetic, and auditory senses when it comes to learning how to read. In the exact same way, that if you were to teach a kid to read the language that they speak, but give them audiobooks for everything that they read, they're not going to learn to read. That part of their brain will not be exercised. It's a different, listening and conversing uses a different part of our brain than reading does. And we need to be able to access all of that. And there's a muscle, so to speak, that has to exercise. So what I would say is, if the choral tracks or the rehearsal tracks are replacing the effort to teach kids and the time that it takes to teach kids to read, then we do have a problem if your context is educational, right? And that's kind of the moral stance that I'm willing to die, or the hill I'm willing to die on. But in this situation of this listener, I'm not sure that the institutions that you work for think of this as educational. If it's extracurricular and it's competition driven, then I don't know that I would use the choral tracks. I probably would, because we've got to get the songs ready for competition, and that is my job. And then, of course, I would be trying to figure out how to piece away gradually at all those fundamental skills and choosing somewhere to start. And of course, I would be using Sight Reading Factory to deal with all, if that's something that you can do where you are. If there are one-to-one devices or even one computer that kids can take turns using, or whatever it is, I would be using Sight Reading Factory, because that's how we custom make everybody's exercises that they're working on. By level. No matter how many levels you have in there, it can handle all of that. And of course, you'll use your Choralosophy discount code, save 10%. But the point, I would use that. And for anyone who has been listening, maybe not as long, I plug Sight Reading Factory because we have a financial arrangement, of course. But you should know that I started using Sight Reading Factory many, many years before there was ever a Choralosophy podcast. I reached out to them and said, I've been using this for so long, I would like to try to sell it on this show. I say things when I talk about that app and that website, it is genuine. Like, I use it all the time, and it is a game changer. And so in the situation that this person's in, if I don't have enough rehearsal time to hit all the different levels that I have in the room in terms of how we read every day, that's going to be how I do it. It's going to be using Sight Reading Factory to assign people different types of exercises and giving them time, even if it's we're going to step out of rehearsal and go over here for 10 minutes and do this and come back. Those types of things can be better than nothing. Maybe not ideal, but it is at least giving kids a chance to work through music at their speed before the big repertoire that starts just pumping through their head, almost like through an intravenous fluid through an IV, when it's just jammed into their brain by older singers. Right, that we need to give them the chance to work at their own pace. Now, this person goes on to talk about the second choir. The second choir is at the university level, and while the same festival pressure exists, the dynamic is slightly different. I have actively tried to introduce music literacy and stronger foundational musicianship, but it has often been received negatively. Some students have openly said they already have too much on their plates academically and feel that adding structured literacy work makes choir feel heavier rather than more helpful. Oh man. Yeah, this is, I get it. If that's not why they're there, then deciding that they need to learn how to read music and do that mental work, especially the older you get. Keep in mind, the further you are away from your childhood, the less elastic the language part of your brain is. And so you're going to feel more and more resistant to learning how to read, write, and speak a new language. The older you get, the harder it gets to do that. And so when you're dealing with these older collegiate level students or college aged 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students, you are going to have more resistance because they've already had many years probably of singing a certain way and singing for certain reasons. I don't know how strongly I feel about what I'm about to say, so I'm just going to try this out, on a podcast for thousands of people. So I would say you might just let them go. In other words, let them do music in a way that gives them joy. And if they sound good and if they're enjoying it and it is If it is causing them to still want to sing, let them be there for the reasons that they want to be there. Focus on the younger ones. Focus on the younger ones, because this is a project, even with the choirs I advise and the teachers that ask me to consult for them, or presentations that I go out and do for folks, or professional developments for school districts. Whenever I do these, this is what I'm preaching, is that this is not a thing you fix for your choir right now. This is a thing you fix over many, many years. And so when I say let the college kids go, what I really mean is don't force the choir to be something that it isn't for them. Focus on the younger kids who don't know any better, that when they show up, you're gonna give them, like, here's what choir is. And it's really, really fun. But also we learn how to do this really cool skill, which will allow you to do music once you're gone. And you sell it to them that way. And then you build it gradually over time so that by the time they are the college kids, they already know how to do these things. And then everything gets better. The singing gets better. The rehearsal gets less stressful. The competition scores, I bet you, will start to go up. All of those things start to happen for you. So back to these college students, this listener says, this problem of the choir feeling heavier when we focus on music literacy, this creates a difficult tension between wanting to build truly independent musicians and dealing with singers who are primarily motivated by performance outcomes and competition results. In both settings, I feel caught between what I know is pedagogically right for long-term choral growth and what the system demands for short-term success. Preach, brother, because this is how a lot of us feel. I would really value your thoughts on how you would approach this situation. Of course, I have shared now my thoughts. And then the letter finishes with, how do you build literacy and musical independence in environments where the culture rewards immediate polished performance over process and foundation? And then he thanks me for the work we do here on Choralosophy and that it has genuinely been a source of encouragement and learning. Well, I thank you for your letter, and we will continue to keep you anonymous. But isn't it a shame that many of us function in professional environments where we have to be anonymous in order to speak up for something that we think is wrong, and to speak up for something that we think is right when we think something is wrong? Isn't that a shame? I am confronted with that shame all the time because, of course, I'm a person who turns on a microphone and a camera and just says these things. But exactly what this person is saying is the project here. When we're talking about all the pedagogical episodes that we do here, this is the project. It is trying to figure out a way to balance that performance outcome, because I'm the first one to say, yes, I want my choirs to sound really, really, really good. That is the goal. But how we get there matters, and cutting corners harms kids. And so if we have the time and the resources, we should be doing everything that we can to balance those two needs. I really do believe that the best way to teach music to large numbers of kids is through an ensemble, because that group performance goal is what drives a lot of them socially. But kind of like when you're trying to give your dog some medicine, we know that they need that mental work, that literacy work. It is so beneficial to them in so many ways that it's like when you're feeding your dog the medicine, you got to give them a big old chunk of meat and then hide the pill inside, because then all they taste is the meat and they think you're just the best owner ever and you just gave them a big piece of meat, but then you also knew that you gave them the medicine that they needed. And that's what we're doing if we try to become a master teacher, a master music teacher. We are trying to figure out a way to make all the medicine go down while the kids feel, or the young singers feel, like they are just having the time of their lives, discovering all of these musical aspects and all of these capacities that they have musically. They are discovering them while we are exploring culture, while we are exploring poetry and the sound their body can make, and they discover how powerful it can be and how great they sound together, right? These are all the things that we're trying to accomplish. And so obviously, this is not an easy job, everybody. So I hope that this episode of kind of just solidarity, where we all feel these things oftentimes, is helpful to you. And just a little bit of a different, I always love it when folks write in. This is honestly one of the more detailed letters that I've gotten from a listener before, and the first one from Kenya. So I thought, hey, let's just make this into an episode where we know that it's very topical to the conversations and to the episodes that we've been doing here lately, related to the first days of school last summer and the Give Them Tools and Let Them Build series that is happening right now in preparation for next school year. So this is right on topic. So thank you so much for writing this letter. And any other folks out there listening, I would love to read your letter on the air sometime. So be sure to send me emails at choralosophy@gmail.com. and head over to the Facebook page. We can have conversations there. I always love to listen, and sometimes we're always seeking And also a reminder that we're always seeking contributions over on the Substack for people who think they might want to write something that the Choralosophy audience should read. Be sure to reach out there as well and submit your material. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more. And then the work we do in the classroom can be customized to what they need in the music and the repertoire they're learning, and it can be customized to their current learning level as a group. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code, and of course now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.